morning, everyone. I'm highly grateful to Boston College, Brian Clement, Professor Demi, and Professor Natana DeLong Bass, Professor Hetty Valley, the Scholar Rescue Fund, and all others who are participating in this event. It is so important that people hear about the dangers of lack of freedom of speech and of radical conservatism among overly empowered right-wing people overall. I want my listeners to recognize the patterns that led to the over-empowerment of ignorant but self-righteous people, often in the name of religion. It's political operatives who weaponize religious conservatism to enhance their own power, who bear the responsibility for this situation. In Pakistan, it started in the 1970s with Chief Martial Law Administrator Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, but more intentionally in the 1980s with military dictator Ziaul Haq and Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, and sadly it continues to this day. But people need to recognize that Pakistan is not alone. In the US, religious conservatism has also been weaponized for political gain. And those who were victimized in DC on January 6, 2021 paid the price. I came to the United States through Harvard Scholars at Risk program. It was unsafe for me to live and work in Pakistan. I was with Professor Shakil Lodge when he was assassinated on September 18, 2014, and I survived a gunshot wound. We were on the way to the Iranian Cultural Center, excited to be discussing the event arranged in the honor of my mentor to celebrate his nomination for Tabgha Imtiaz Medal of Excellence. After his assassination, I received threats on social media and through text messages. I applied for the Harvard Scholars at Risk program and was offered a fellowship. I knew that going back to Pakistan was not safe when Dr. Wahibur Rahman, assistant professor at Karachi University's Mass Communication Department, was also assassinated on April 29, 2015. He was a media advisor at the University of Karachi and was outspoken in helping Professor Old's family obtain justice. Professor Shakil Old was a well-liked, popular, and respected dean of the Faculty of Islam University of Karachi. He was shot dead. Al-Qaeda claimed credit, saying that it was done in the name of God. Professor Old, known for his liberal views, had been labeled a blasphemer in a text message campaign. After Professor Old's assassination, there were many columns in newspapers and magazines about the incident. Most of them had two themes: the condemnation of his assassination and the writers' efforts to distance themselves from the viewpoints that led to his assassination. Why did voices speak out against religious extremism until it was too late in Professor Old's case? And why do they not speak out against continuing religious extremism? Instead of speaking against the regressive approach, they prefer to show their distance from Professor Old's moderate ideas. His brave and firm commitment to rationality had sidelined him. He was a principled man. As the prevailing custom of privileging madrasa graduates in admissions and hiring was curtailed after Professor Old became the dean of the faculty. This also intensified the animosity in the circles of influential, ultra-conservative religious authorities. Moreover, due to his moderate positions, Professor Old faced considerable backlash from more conservative faculty members in his own department. In addition, he was confronted with colleagues' plagiarized works and forged degrees, but who nonetheless had the backing of powerful, either ultra-conservative religious or political leaders. Traditionalist, conservatives, exclusivist ideologies are critically weak in religious pluralism. For example, the ideology display a lack of respect not only for other religions, but for sects within Islam as well, reflecting a radical divergence from the Quran's message. The Quran explicitly asserts that there must be no coercion in matters of faith, 2:256, and that religious pluralism is God's will, 5:48. It was God's decision to create not just a single nation or tribe, but a world of different nations, religions, race, ethnicities, tribes, and languages. Quran 2:62, 2:85, 3 and 4, 3:64, 4:164, 5:45-48, 5:69, and I can go on and on. Traditionalist, exclusivist theologies have opened space for extremists who have instrumentalized Deobandi and Wahhabi theologies for their own sectarian agendas that serve to undermine social cohesion. This exclusivism exists despite the fact that Sharia provides fundamental rights to all humans regardless of their affinity with Islam. Hence, according to Ismail Faruqi, the five main objectives of Sharia are: 1. Protection of the self; 2. The salvation of the intellect, reason; 3. Safeguarding of religion; 4. Procreation; and 5. Protection of property. All humans are born free. No ruler may take away people's freedom, whether religious, cultural, social, economic, or political. Their entitlement to bodily safety and private property, to associate with one another, to follow their faith, to sustain their culture, and to articulate their views is sacred under Sharia. In this, the Sharia does not differentiate between Muslims and non-Muslims. All persons are equal before it. Certainly, it provides unlimited support to those denied the aforementioned freedoms. It permits them to defy oppressors and enforces upon all Muslims the compulsion to support them in their conflict and to justify the right that has been breached. And to whosoever rises in opposition to injustice, there is to be no blame. 2241. The foundation for this social equality is the equality of all humans before God. Their one and only Creator who said, "People, we have created you all of a single pair, a male and a female, and we have constituted you into tribes and nations for the purpose of identification. Nobler among you is the more righteous." 49.3. The prevalence of conservative Quranic interpretations has challenged and marginalized minorities in Pakistan. According to Professor Kamara San, Pakistan deflected attention from its defeat after the 1971 civil war by demonizing India and focusing on the alleged superiority of Islam over Hinduism. These ideas were incorporated into the national syllabus that programmed future generations with enmity towards India. It resulted in today's conservative and prejudiced mainstream, which justifies purification from the alleged influence of Hinduism and the West. The result is that instead of alleged manipulation by India or the West, Pakistanis are now subjected to manipulation by their own hardline conservatives. The ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan, in his book Pakistan: A Personal History, points out that from the start of independence, Pakistan has persistently failed to integrate the education system, which is divided by social classes. The westernized elite who took over from the British colonial rulers had not much interest in searching for a fusion of Islamic ideals and scientific progress. Rather, they espoused a system that permitted them to perpetuate themselves in power, never permitting true democracy to thrive. Our reactionary ulama upheld a medieval approach toward religion that developed ever more distorted as Islam was hijacked as a political tool. As a result, public understanding of the need and support for a change in traditional views is lacking. Today, if popular media are to be believed, most Pakistanis support hardline conservative ideology. In the words of the leader of the movement that created Pakistan and Pakistan's first president, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan originated as the laboratory of Islam, a laboratory for applying Islamic ideals in the modern world. Pakistan Pakistan has become a hotbed of civil strife and sectarianism, where various groups are engaged in fratricidal competition for correctness rather than cooperation in the pursuit of Quran's objective of a pluralistic society, characterized by collaboration in the pursuit of social justice. Consequently, scholars who question prevailing traditionalist interpretations are currently particularly at risk. They are institutionally marginalized, which has led to relative impoverishment. Professor Shakil Odd's only property was his 2001 Toyota Plaza. His 4 sons studied in a local non-elite private school, comparatively in 2 decades. Dr. Farah Kashmi, one of Pakistan's most popular female Islamic scholars, has built from scratch the huge empire of Al-Huda International. Her wealth and influence surpassed that of generations-old feudal landlords in Pakistan. The ultra-conservatives' influence on the country has accelerated radicalization in society. Pakistani society has become even more intolerant of minor differences in the last 2 decades. According to author Sam Robinson, seemingly trivial distinctions of hand positions in prayer and the exact wording of the call to prayer have become highly divisive markers of difference. These differences between Sunnis are no longer trivial. They have become a pretext for animosity and violence. The opposition Professor Odd faced throughout his entire career reflects the radicalization of Pakistani society. Scholars, whether from the East or West, proclaim conformist ideas are welcomed by Pakistanis around the globe, but the systematic study of Islamic sources based on objective reasoning and critical analysis is not welcomed in Pakistan. And it is in fact viewed with suspicion, as if Islam itself is under attack. Professor Shakil Lodge used to say that those who study Islam holistically, informed by an understanding of the Quran's overall teaching of human equality and dignity, will develop interpretations different from the predominant authorities, which are mired in perdition. He said it is the undermining of their own authority that they fear, rather than the undermining of the authority of the Quran. Accordingly, he believed that scholarly research should never be limited by any human-created boundary. Odd stated that a researcher should always be open to criticism. He used to say in his lectures, he is not a researcher who could not go against his own previous findings. In fact, a researcher cannot be stagnant. Rather, they must always seek new perspectives. This can only happen if they have the independence to work objectively and express their views without fear of reprisals. Traditionally in Pakistan, the precedents set by an accepted madhab, the school of jurisprudential reasoning, are considered a domain beyond objective reason. But Professor Odd rejected that approach. My slain professor recommended that instead of interpreting the Quran through Hadith traditions, as the dominant conservatives do, their views should be scrutinized through an informed Quranic perspective. The privileging of Hadith as the arbiter of the eternal message of the Quran is in fact putting the cart before the horse. Undoubtedly, Hadith reports have always been used by the ulama, religious authorities, to understand the context of verses in order to gain a clear understanding of the core values embedded in the verses, the illah, so that they can inform application of the values in changed circumstances. But using interpretations of the legal implications of verses in specific circumstances conveyed in Hadith as the sources of positive law, instead of going to the verses of the Quran, is a modern innovation, according to Dr. Khalid Masood. Likewise, Professor Odd recommended that instead of allowing temporally contextualized interpretations of verses conveyed in Hadith to dictate the meaning of verses, traditional interpretations should be scrutinized through a holistic Quranic perspective. Otherwise, the Quran's eternal message becomes limited due to the temporally restricted approach of certain hadiths. Scrutinizing the heritage of hadith through a holistic Quranic lens would result in more pluralistic and rationally coherent perspectives than are on display today in Pakistan. Odd was convinced, based on his engagement with the Quran itself, that religion teaches love and respect for humanity, rather than dividing humanity into us and them. God is universal, as is the message delivered by his prophets. Odd used to say that we do not need to convince people of one side of beliefs. Rather, we need to promote and promulgate goodness. As the Quran says, why with one another in good works. 5:48. Professor Shakil Lodge used to say that researchers have no religion, meaning that they are not bound to any certain sect or religion. This limitless freedom to think, absorb, and study from a variety of sources and climb each step of the learning ladder make them a true scholar. The limited approach of influential conservatives impedes social development. Consequently, the weaker sectors of society, women and minorities, suffer. In fact, the injustices they face are certainly contrary to the holistic teachings of the Quran and the Prophet's fundamental aim to strengthen the weak and poor segments of society. Pakistani society is becoming more radical through the entrenched biased national curriculum and the influence of well-established religious leaders. Research in Islamic studies that is not in compliance with prevailing Pakistani Islamic traditions is discouraged. On August 29, 2012, a fatwa was released from conservative Jama Darul Uloom Karachi, saying, in view of the details in front of us, Professor Muhammad Shakil Oj has incredulous and apostate ideas. His theories led to shirk, idolatry, innovation, and in many matters towards obvious disbelief. Therefore, the rulings of apostate apply to him. People should be alert and away from his ideas. On September 19, 2014, the day after his assassination, the same Darul Uloom issued another statement on the same letterhead denying the previous fatwa. It says, it is revealed to my knowledge that a TV channel is transmitting news that a fatwa was issued either from me or from Darul Uloom Karachi, declaring Professor Muhammad Shakil Oj Wajibul Qatl, obligated to be assassinated. I, as the president and as Mufti of Jama Darul Uloom Karachi, clearly state that such a fatwa was never issued. It is further important to mention that 2 years back, on September 19, 2012, Professor Shakil Oj himself sent a letter to us in which he asked us either to deny or confirm the fatwa attributed to Darul Ifta, declaring him as obligated to be assassinated. Therefore, after a full investigation by Darul Ifta, its rector, Mr. Maulana Mufti Abdul Rauf Sukarvi, had replied to him that no fatwa like that had issued from us, and the photocopy of the fatwa attached with the letter of Professor Shakil Oj was based on fraud and fake. Now again, I, Mufti Rafi Muhammad Usmani, president of Darul Uloom Karachi, and people of Darul Ifta completely deny this fatwa. Note, the letter that was sent to Professor Shakil Oj is, as it is, secure in our records. My point is, if this statement denying the fatwa had been issued publicly instead of replying just to Oj, it might have saved his life. The ulama are guilty in their silence. Silence on injustices has become part of their character. The ulama are blameworthy of silence. Silence on sectarian violence, silence on social injustices, and silence on injustices on minorities. And since my work is on the educational system in Pakistan, I think it is important if I could mention some of the important statistics. So there are 24 million are out of school children, and 77% of out of school Pakistani children have never been to school, and 23% dropped out. 51% of women in Pakistan have ever attended a school, and in rural areas, this number is even lower at 40%. Approximately 45% of government primary school buildings in Pakistan are in an unsatisfactory condition. This is a map of Pakistan. As you can see, the reds are where the less than 60%, greater than 60% girls are out of school. And most of those areas are in Balochistan and in Sindh, and some in the northwestern regions of Pakistan. But all the greens are where less than 30% girls are out of school, and all the greens are mostly in Punjab. And this is where do most of Pakistan's out of school children live. So you can see here again, more 70% in Balochistan are out of school, and all over 47% are out of school in Pakistan. So I think the budget is also important. So if you can see here, from 2013 to 2018, consistently Balochistan get the least amount of money, and Punjab get the highest amount of money. And then if you look at the population, that makes sense because Punjab has the greatest population in Pakistan. However, FATA, that has the least population than Balochistan, whereas FATA is getting more money consistently than Balochistan. Maybe that's why like 70%, one of the reasons it could be that they are not getting enough money consistently. So now, what are the problems in the national curriculum? There are unnecessary ideas of the superiority of Muslims and depreciation of non-Muslims. That the violation of the Constitution, Article 22. That article says that no person attending any educational institution shall be required to receive religious instructions or take part in any religious ceremony or attend religious worship if such instruction, ceremony, or worship relates to our religion other than his own. So besides the persisting reputation of religion and history, lessons in subjects other than Islamic studies and Pakistani studies like English, Urdu, take the space and time for relevant knowledge and reduces the quality of education. And the biased projection of history instills hatred for Hindus and other minorities. Subjects like Pakistani studies are polluted with fiction rather than factual history. The extreme polarization of military, war, and martyrdom in school textbooks imply warmongering, which makes children passionate for some desperate glory. So this slide is important, I guess. This is an Afghan textbook that utilizes pictures of grenades and rifles and shells and symbols. And this syllabus for the radicalized syllabus for Afghan children who live in campus in Pakistan was designed in the United States at the University of Nebraska. And then here it is today's. These textbooks are from Ikra School. It is a very well-known school for lower class people. So and then it's all over Pakistan. So you can see things in the basic books, and it's small, but I can tell you that because I have these books. So it says like talwar, the sword, and it says underneath it talwar kis kaam aati hai, talwar kafiron ka sar kalam karne ke kaam aati hai. The use of sword, it is used to behead disbelievers. And then and for news, and the picture is 9/11, and other you can see the pistols, and then here it's a general knowledge that is a compulsory subject, and it's a fantasizing Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi that he attacked Somnath, and so it is basically, my point is they are teaching that it is okay to disrespect other religious ideals. So then there are technical issues. Okay, I'm sorry. So the elite English medium schools, elite Islamic schools, and the military schools do not use the national curriculum. Their books are purified from radicalized ideas. And then there are technical issues in the national curriculum, like language issue. Urdu, that is spoken by just 7.5% of the population, is imposed on all over Pakistani public schools. It perhaps led to excessive dropping out, as many children themselves are disinclined to continue schooling. Anila Parveen, a teacher at the government girls' college school in Cairo, Tata, told Dawn that they had to contend with 3 different languages: Urdu, English, and Sindhi. It is not easy for students to keep up and makes life very hard for teachers as well, she said. Madiha Afzal described some insightful comments from a bureaucrat she interviewed. Students are not required to study world history to place Pakistan's history in any sort of context. In 2013, I asked a senior official at the federal curriculum wing about the possibility of making world history a core subject. His response: why would our students need to study world history when they live in Pakistan? So I compared the Pakistan Studies book and the books that is being taught in the elite schools, the military schools. So this Pakistan Studies book, of course, was written by Pakistani scholars, and then there's so many of them, like 8 or 9. And then the other book is just written by one person, that is Nicholas Kelly, a British historian. So I can give you just one example. The Pakistan Studies book on page 135, under the heading of religious events, it says, similarly, there are certain traditions of birth and death. Birth of a child, especially a male child, is celebrated. Gifts are presented to each other. It is accommodating the negligence of a female childbirth as a religious and cultural tradition, which is not true in many cases. And then it is also important to discuss that why is the dichotomy entrenched in Pakistani society. So India's dominant social categories had always been caste class oriented, and that we inherited from them. And then among the Indian Muslims, a two-tier hierarchy emerged. That education was hierarchized and dichotomized. So according to Akhtar Hassan Malik, today this privileged class serves its own interests with tight control on all the gains of the country. Practically 80% of the country's revenue derived from the subjugated classes. The bureaucrats siphon off and dissipate the country's revenue generated in refining the already established regions where elite society resides. Then the lowest 20% of the population obtains only 7.3% of total state revenue, whereas the highest 20% has increased its stake to 44.5%. The establishments which rely greatly on scientific expertise and education, the army, the bureaucracy, and the politicians upheld their authority by averting the dissemination of knowledge to the common people. This remained the British custom of not educating the common people, only the elite. So, what are the complexities of the educational system? Despite the severity of its educational crisis, Pakistan is still not spending on education adequately, as genuinely and seriously as it spends on its military budget. The defense budget does not include military pensions. That's 180 billion rupees. The expenses of the nuclear program estimated at $747 million by the Stimson Center. Or military operations in FADA, federally administered tribal areas. According to some researchers, the military budget is 7 times higher than the educational budget in Pakistan. In addition, political leaders try to make them happy, such as Finance Minister Ishaq Dar, while presenting the federal budget 2017-18, stated, the frontier constabulary Jawans will also be given a fixed allowance of 8,000 rupees per month. The special allowance and the fixed allowance are both separate from the defense budget. More to the point, the actual value of the military has to be evaluated partly in terms of the possibilities being missed for expanding in education. According to Kevin Watkins, Pakistan's military budget reflects political decisions taken in the light of national security concerns. Yet increased investments in education with attendant benefits for employment and social inclusion would do a great deal to enhance Pakistan's long-term national security. Then Pakistan is underperforming at its current budget levels. How is Pakistan consuming its own needs is equally as important as how much it is spending. Then teachers play merely a mechanical role since they are alienated in policy making. Their views are not considered in developing the curriculum, writing textbooks, and designing evaluation systems. They lack the inspiration, competences, or utensils to teach. Their pay is still too low to attract the best brains. Due to excess of corruption, there is a dearth of competent teachers. There is an unresolved issue of the absence of teachers, and if they are present, teachers are generally abandoned. Then there are ghost schools and teachers are common. There are at least 8,252 non-functional and ghost schools in Pakistan, out of which 6,164 are in Sindh alone. I want to show you some of the picture of the ghost schools. So these are the schools that are working perfectly on papers and getting their money annually or monthly, but in reality, these schools are like this. One of the schools had been taken by police and they made, this was the girls' schools on paper, but in reality, it's a police station and so. Then what are the problems? And this is one of the girls' school in a rural area. So these girls are lucky that they are in the school. Then what are the problems with the Islamic schools, elite English medium schools, cadet schools, and non-elite English medium schools? The elite Islamic schools are sprouting far and wide. They are limited to a certain kind of elite Pakistani Muslims. In light of the above mentioned statistics, these expensive Islamic schools become superfluous and add another burden. Their main features are exclusivity, high fees, and righteousness determined via perfect dress codes and rituals. They are creating a new exclusive bubble for a particular kind of rich Pakistani Muslim. According to Saba Imtiaz, religious minorities and believers of Islamic sects are routinely threatened and targeted by militants and subject to conspiracies and propaganda in Pakistan. Hence, instead of exclusion, children would be more benefited by diversity in the classroom. Yet these schools aren't just developing a new education system or generating wealth. They are forming the religious identity, ideas, and morals of the next generation elites. And that is a powerful, important proposition. I want to show you one example. This is a video that I want to share.
Our curriculum is specially designed to integrate Islam into everything we do. Our staff is qualified and trained, alhamdulillah, and we are privileged that Dr. Faiz Hashmi herself takes tarbiyah sessions with our teachers on a weekly basis. The school provides a range of facilities such as central heating and air conditioning, conference room, auditorium, bookstore, daycare, sick bay, cafeteria, bank, and data security systems.
These elite schools, like this, is very expensive, of course. Like not all people can afford it, especially in Pakistan. And then the same institution, Al Huda International, runs a school for poor kids like this. So like open air schools for poor people with low quality education system, as you can see. Great schools for rich people. So then elite English medium schools, the governing classes hand over their power and privilege to their descendants by quality education in these schools. These private schools are selling English at unreasonably high prices. It is a lucrative business industry. The ruling class uses their influence to grant multiple subsidies to the elite English medium schools. Their teachers are highly competent. Curriculum and pedagogy are more human, modern, innovative, and interesting than government schools and madrasas. This has caused educational apartheid in the country. Then cadet school. According to Tariq Rahman, the cadet schools are also subsidized by the government. Some of them even provide free groceries to their credits. These are types of funding which poor children do not get as well in the equal measure and of the equal quality. Non-elite English medium private schools are inflicted with considerably less educated teaching staff and a dearth of facilities. Therefore, typically, their education method is based on rote learning. Overall, they use the English version of the National Textbook Board curriculum. The government uses public subsidies to build and support the elitist system of schooling. As Tariq Rahman reports, indeed, the state invested heavily in creating a parallel system of education for the elite, especially the elite, which would presumably run elitist institution in future. That why is the development of madrasa curriculum needed? According to Jashnu Das, a senior economist at the World Bank, only 1.5% of the students are enrolled in Pakistani madrasa. However, society is influenced by their Friday sermons and influential media programs. So other than the national curriculum, they are also liable for the heightened religiosity in Pakistani society. And madrasa curriculum is suffering from archaism, the inferiority of women, exclusivity, and sectarianism. Madrasa students are not well equipped for the present world. According to Qasim Zaman, few ulama are proficient to handle the complexities of fiqh. The handbooks of Islamic law are from a different time and era. To exercise their rules and underlying principles to present issues is extremely a difficult job. Their morality is strictly medieval and patriarchal. The customs and attitudes are at the very least reinforced by traditional religious education in which women are familiarized with their inferiority from the start. In general, women are regarded as intellectually deficient. So males have 16 years of schooling in madrasas, whereas women's madrasa education is unjustly reduced to 4 to 6 years. Then the Wahhabi Salafi preaching based on particular categories of hadith and on homogeneous ideas for the success in the hereafter, only for a particular kind of Muslim. With their rising influence, the sectarian exclusivity is increasing in society. Consequently, other sects and minorities are suffering with Salafi notion of following the authentic hadith. Then each sect of ulama takes a radical position versus its rival and attempts to verify how divergent that group is from Orthodox Islam. They are infected with fratricidal sectarianism that A, set as rivals the Sunnis, that is the Deobandis, Barelvis, Ahl Hadith, and all others in between, versus the Shias. B, both Sunnis and Shias versus Ahmadis. So I just want to show you one example. So Dr. Akhtar Hassan al-Malik, he did a very good job. He went to Pakistan and he sat in the elite schools, private schools, and in madrasa. So this is one example where he was observing a madrasa class. So if a student asked a question, so the student, a Bareli Muslim had converted to his faith, has converted his faith to a Deobandi. What directives do we have for him? Teacher, how old is he? Student, according around 62 or 63. Teacher, let him know that all his lifetime prayers have been dissipated and he has become a murtad, diverted from Islam. His nikah marriage contract with his life has been culminated and any relationship with her would now fall under adultery. In the present day life, when we are surrounded by innumerable evil attractions, staying firm in our faith is the most difficult struggle. Hats off to those who protect their religious beliefs. So this is the slide, and this is one my professor, and the rest. This is Amjad Sabri. He's a very well-known Naat singer, a Sufi singer, and he was also assassinated. And the picture is his funeral, because most population in Pakistan is Barelvi. They follow, the Sufi saints. So you can see the crowd. And then the last two pictures are Shia scholars. They were also assassinated. And then the first picture you see, he survived a bomb. So he does not live in Pakistan anymore. Luckily, he was the only person who survived. So the entrenchment of sectarian hatred and restriction of thought is the fruit of the ultra-conservative influence on Pakistani society. The possibility of immediate change in prevailing ideology appears improbable for two reasons. Not only does Pakistani society in general suffer from a lack of critical thinking and objectivity due to the dominance of religious conservatives in education, but those who are capable of critical thinking remain silent. Silencing the voices of the scholars is not a characteristic of the Islamic faith. Society should have respect for scholars, even if their research findings are in conflict with prevailing traditions. This is the only way out of the current stagnation and regression in Pakistani society. Thank you so much.
We have about 15 minutes for questions.
I have two questions. One, you see reasons for hope. So you see in the Pakistani society the possibility of political change that will have positive repercussions for the country and for the scholars and the researchers in there. So that's the first one. The second one, what you indicated concerning education is happening in other areas of civil society. For example, think about health. One example of the surface in the Western media was the example of the lady health workers who are providing vaccination funded by UNICEF to women and children. They are helping women about reproductive issues and health issues. And it was presented, at least in the Western countries, the media literature, as an example is successful, as an indicated possibility of empowerment women in that. That was an accurate way of presenting what daily health workers are doing. That's part of paid advertising, but in reality, there's even when we think about.
Thank you so much. So you said the first question about the hope. So there are some, NGOs and like ICRD, International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. They are working in Pakistan, certainly in madrasas for tourism. And then there's a Bhatia Trust. There's another NGO. There are 14 schools, 5,000 students, equal numbers of both girls and boys. Then Karen Armstrong Center for Compassion Network in Pakistan. But my point is, like, there are other compassionate schools networking. There are 5,000 teachers are trained. Like, my point is, like, these NGOs, they are working. But if you look at the population of Pakistan, like, and then the students that are out of school, it's basically government job. No NGO can, work all over the Pakistan. So there are some hopes, of course, there are always hope, like, the small, and as a community, there are people. Anita Weiss has mentioned so many examples that one example I just remember that in Sindh, in Sindh there's a village, and they were tired of all these extremism and all this system, so they themselves put a sanitary system. Somehow they managed to do it, and then they themselves put a curriculum system in their own school for their own thing. But my point is, like, for getting a certificate like metric, the 10th grade certificate that's a board all over the country, they have to go through the same curriculum. So again, it's a government job. No NGO, no one small person cannot work for all over 47% of children are out of school, like 24 million population. 24 million kids are out of school right now. So even those kids who are at school, like they like I mentioned that yes. So faced with a choice between having a child help in the fields or learn nothing at school, many parents rationally pick the former. So many parents, they say, what's the point? Because the school does not have any, hands-on activities or train them to get some kind of job. So 10 years at school, kids would be at nothing. And then if they had, they think that if my kids, they're poor people with very limited resources. So they think that if my kid work in the field or work in a mechanic shop or somewhere, they would get some kind of skill. So they would be able to earn some money. But if my kid goes to the school, there would be nothing. Their school does not have any kind of those, labor training. That should be it would be an incentive for poor people to send their kids to school. And then the second question about the women empowerment, yes, again, there is some kind of here and there things are going on, but overall, again, because the curriculum is conditioning the minds of kids and minds of women as well. When because my whole education is in Pakistan, I also considered, okay, this is a God's decision. That's why I have this limited support. But when I grow my intellect, then I realized that they made it up. It's not God. Because Quran talks so many times about gender equality, women's rights, So because traditionally, like all societies are patriarchal. So that's why. But yes, there are some hopes over in there, especially in this social media age. Many women are working from their homes as well. But again, the government has to work because it's their job to work for poor people, not for themselves.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned the distinction in the schools, the elite schools, English schools in Pakistan, and the more traditional schools, and kind of the struggles that they have. But who are the teachers at those schools? Is there a distinction in the teachers who get the jobs to teach at the elite schools versus the teachers who teach at the general public schools?
So they have a system, like if you want a job at a government school, you have to, other than your BA, you have to go through a 2 years teachers training. That's called BTech or something. So then they are able to get the government school job. But for elite schools, they do not consider that. You have to have a master's degree or from an university degree. The very highly educated teachers are only, basically the elite people teaches their own kids, basically, if you think about it. But the concept of common good is lacking. That's why they think it's okay, because this has all been going forever. Because of course we have inherited every culture from India, and it's always been like the elite peoples have higher education system and everything. So my point is, like, in God's eyes, all human beings, you say from your Friday sermon that all human beings are equal. But to have a quality education, you have to born in certain kind of class. So like I was, like my background is from lower middle class. So I never got quality education. So that's my question. Why? That's very important. And then how would you know that, the real talent is only that, like 73%, I want to be accurate. So 73% enrollment in the government schools and 26% enrollment in the private schools. So how would you know that only 26% are the most talented people in Pakistan? That we are wasting talents. We are wasting, human intelligence, because you have created a bastions of quality education within those limited approach. There are very few people, like 20%, like 26% includes those lower class private schools as well. So it would be like hardly 10 to 15% who really get the quality education. That includes the Catholic schools, the army, public schools as well. So if you have if you have money, or if you have power, like if you belong to a military, then your child would be able to get the quality education. So you have to born to get the quality education. Yes, sure.
So the primers, the textbooks that you showed earlier in the slides, have they been that way for a long time? Is that a relatively new thing? And are those condoned by the government? Are they part of the national curriculum, or are those just in some of the Islamic schools?
So one of the slides. So there's one book that was this is the government book.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that kind of thing, like they fantasize these kind of things. So that's how they. And then this book, these books are from private schools, but these private schools have incentive for kids that if you send your kid to this ICRA school, the fees are pretty low, and then they would memorize the Quran. So by the time your child is in 10th grade, he or she would be memorized in half of the Quran, as well as the metric, general 10th grade education as well. But they are teaching this kind of thing. And it was not like this before, before Afghan war. It was not that kind of, this really affected Pakistan as well. The Afghan war really affected it, because all the terrorists were heroes at that time. Pakistani people, like my childhood was that time, and like, oh, they are mujahideen, they are fighting the infidels, and then they really influenced the whole Pakistani society. So that's why.
I'm really struck by your presentation. By your courage, by your message, by your reform, your the way you're addressing curricular reform. You're here now 7 years, 8 years, and
I'm just wondering if you could say more about how you're being received or how things are going in terms of whether you have other colleagues like yourself who are doing work like this. I mean, it just strikes me that the challenges that you're identifying are ones that, you know, that you yourself, that's securing a PhD in Islamic studies from Karachi, were already in a way of looking for a way that your country could be more equitable and that women especially would have a greater role. Here you are now alienated from your country, but you're speaking about your country law. I'm just wondering how you're being received, how you're doing and what's going on with your message, and whether that you have other companions along this.
So since I am here, I am, you know, I was in a very difficult situation in Pakistan, so I get paranoid as well. So I'm not in any social media. I don't have any social media account at all. And then, so I am kind of alienated from my colleagues in general. But, and then, you know, when I came to here, my question basically was that I started my book from that person, that people, you know, my family and friends, they came to me and then they said that, oh, okay, so that's why they assassinated Professor Raj. Why he said those things. So I was like shocked, like, so you are saying that you cannot do research, you have to do say the same thing. So I was like, that was my question. Why those educated people? They were not illiterate. They were educated people. And why they have this kind of mindset? That's the question, the basic question I had. And when I came here, I started doing the research. I was thinking that maybe, you know, all my life I thought that the elite people have their own bubble, they live in their own luxuries. They don't have time to think about us, you know, the regular poor Pakistani. So they don't have time. So they don't, that's why they don't care. And they all their life they live in their bubble. But now when I came and I did the research, then I get so mad. They intentionally, you know, design a curriculum so that poor people will always be poor. Like it's a kind of slavery kind of chain thing that I cannot break that chain. I broke that chain, but I had to get a pull it short and left my country forever. So, you know, it's like my cousins, my family, my friends, like they are all struggling. And day by day, you know, as you know, the conditions are so bad, economical conditions are so bad in Pakistan that they, like, you know, and you know, one time my sibling said that, why the prices are getting so high? You know, I used to buy this, but now I cannot buy. I said exactly the same thing my father used to say when I was a child. Like it's the same thing. We cannot break that chain because you know it's designed by them. So yes, I am alienated from my colleagues and you know many of my colleagues gave me the suggestion that don't leave Pakistan, just stay quiet. I used to paint, you know, oil canvas painting. So somebody said that you should just leave this and start doing painting. You are good at painting. You know, there is something inside me. I cannot, you know, I believe that I have a life for a limited time, like every other human. I'm not here forever. So I have to do, you know, I have to say for myself, for my own people.
On that same note, could you just say something about your own decision to pursue a degree in Islamic studies in Karachi?
Yeah, so I hope I'm answering your question.
I don't want to be invasive by asking it, but
Yeah,
it's an enormous opportunity, you know, to hear your narrative as well as your research. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, now like all lower Pakistani middle class women, I was married when I was 21 years, arranged marriage. I never saw my husband before I got married. And then, you know, they always expect that you should get a baby within a year or so, and I never got. That's another point. Like if a woman does not, you know, is not designed to have a baby, then what's their life? Nothing. So I was like always very depressed and all the situation is very, like patriarchal traditional society. So of course, when you are depressed, where would you go? And most Pakistanis are very religious people. Like here in America, I see the same thing here as well. So of course, I went to madrasa, and then my family is very conservative, so the madrasa was the only allowed place that I could go. So I went to madrasa and took admission in madrasa. I completed my graduation and all that. So it's funny. Look, when I got married, I was like this because lower Pakistani women wear and stuff like this. It's a symbol of like, okay, you belong. Otherwise, if you're a leaf, you do not cover your head. So, when it was 1994, and then when I went to madrasa, I started wearing, hijab and then niqab, and then I've become so, conservative, of course, because I wanted to go in heaven. And then I didn't have a TV in my home, like and then when I completed, because there was only 6 years, so I said, what else I can do now? They said, you can teach in madrasa. I said, no, I want to learn. I don't want to, limit myself. I want to grow. And because the madrasa, I love, even in my dream today, like, I'm when I have a good dreams, I'm teaching hadiths and, Arabic, and, I love that because I love madrasa, but I wanted to grow more. So I went to Karachi University, did my master's in Arabic, and there I met a professor, Dr. Amna Afreen, and he was, at that time, like, I don't know, 2004, he was like, we cannot do that today because it's so, your life would be in danger. But he was a very brave professor. He used to say that you can drink alcohol as a medicine, and like you can listen to music. And the class was with like madrasa educated, males who had been 10 years, 12 years to madrasa, and women like me. So I was like, I was raised to a hand. No, we cannot do that. These are free. And then I used to have long talks in his office, and he became my favorite professor because he rationally, attacked. So that person really, and then of course, I wanted to continue my education because I didn't have anything else again. So then I took admission in PhD, and that's how. And then when I did my PhD, I was like in the library from 9 to 5. And then I found Dr. Fazlur Rahman, and his thoughts really inspired me. Oh my God, that's a complete different interpretation. I was like, okay. Then I was like, and my English was so bad, still, but I was like dictionaries, always looking for things. And I love that time because I was changed. I was completely changed. I was back to my 94 parents. Yeah.
So thank you very much.